On this edition of Jerusalem Dateline, an historic moment as Kevin McCarthy becomes only the second U.S. House Speaker to address Israel's Knesset in 25 years. And an economic visionary builds bridges with Israeli businesses and innovators. And reconnecting a new generation with biblical culture as one organization promotes planting vineyards in Israel. Plus, the Sea of Galilee comes to the U.S. in a special show of friendship between Israelis and one American family. All this and more coming up on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Iran's foreign minister made a rare visit to Israel's border this weekend with a message of violence against the Jewish state. He met with the leader of the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah and repeated Iran's vow to support the group.
We're here today in the area of Marun al-Ras to declare again with a loud voice that we support the resistance in Lebanon against a Zionist entity. From the other side, the Zionist regime is living in the worst times. It lives in compounding political and societal crisis.
Iran is a main backer of Hezbollah and has supplied the group with weapons and funds for years. The visit came 3 weeks after terrorists in Lebanon fired dozens of rockets into Israel, damaging property and wounding 2 people. Israel responded with rare airstrikes on Hamas targets inside Lebanon. The visit also came weeks after a major geopolitical shift in the region. Iran and Saudi Arabia announced they would restore diplomatic ties after years of hostility and rivalry. Well, for the first time in 25 years, a Speaker of the House of Representatives addressed Israel's parliament. Speaker Kevin McCarthy reaffirmed the deep bond between Israel and the United States. Speaker Kevin McCarthy came at the invitation of Israel's Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana. Together they reviewed an honor guard and laid a wreath in memory of the fallen soldier. Beyond the ceremonies here at the Knesset, Speaker McCarthy reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to prevent the Islamic Republic of Iran from becoming a nuclear power.
As we stand shoulder to shoulder against Iran's regional aggression, we must always remain resolute in our commitment that Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon.
McCarthy's speech came just days after Israel celebrated their 70th anniversary, and he celebrated how the nation's birth fulfilled biblical prophecy.
The prophet Isaiah predicted a brighter future to come. Inspired by God, he shared this command: arise, shine, thy light to come. My friends, today, 75 years after declaring independence, Israel's lights shine brighter than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel's rebirth is nothing less than a modern miracle, and I thank you for it.
McCarthy said the U.S. House of Representatives recently passed a bipartisan resolution celebrating both the anniversary and the Abraham Accords, while also warning the #1 threat to Israel and those accords is Iran.
Most of the turmoil in this region of violence and instability can be traced back to that source, which continues to fund terrorism, arms its proxy militias, and pursues nuclear weapons.
During a news conference following his speech, CBN News asked the Speaker about U.S. military cooperation with Israel against Iran. You made a commitment in your speech that the U.S. will not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Right now, there's a sense here in Israel sometimes they may have to go it alone. Would you recommend to the administration that would join Israel militarily if they have to?
One thing I've always learned is peace through strength. I think the entire region, the entire world knows an armed nuclear Iran is not a safe place to be for the world. And I think it's very clear with the people behind me as well. We will never stand to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
During this visit, McCarthy also met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He told a Hebrew publication that if President Biden doesn't invite Netanyahu to Washington, he will. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN and Knesset member Danny Danon told CBN News the threat of Iran is a major reason Netanyahu needs to be at the White House.
It shouldn't be the burden of Israel to deal with the threat coming from Iran. Nuclear Iran, it's a threat for the American people. God forbid, if they will have a nuclear bomb, You can find it in the port of LA or Miami in one of the containers. That's why the American people should be worried about nuclear Iran the same way we are worried about it. It's a global effort, and I expect that President Biden will invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House to discuss those issues. It must happen ASAP.
At his press conference, McCarthy summed up why he wanted to visit Israel first.
As I said in my speech, this is the very first parliament outside of America that I went to speak at. And I did it on purpose, because there's no greater ally between and no stronger bond to America and Israel. To celebrate 75 years. If we just thought back 75 years, what would Israel look like today? And how strong would our bond be? I don't think anybody envisioned it would be this fruitful and this strong. As America, we are a better nation because Israel exists. The world is a safer place because Israel exists. I'm proud of the fact that America represented and recognized Israel just 11 minutes after they became a nation. On this trip, I did not know of the story of my own hometown, my own bond to a family that I know, the Rudnicks, that they would train in my hometown of Bakersfield, to be in the Air Force, to defend and create the city of Israel. As I said in my speech, 75 years is just a blimp in the long history of Israel. It goes back more than 3,500 years when Moses led the children out of Egypt and then to the Promised Land, to King David, to King Solomon, and to come back. And we want to make sure that we continue to flourish and strengthen. And the great strides that we have made, the Abraham Accords, the region has become safer, economically stronger, and we want to expand those even further.
Coming up, supporting the startup nation and investing in biblical Judea and Samaria as a Louisiana economist connects with innovators and brings opportunities back to his home state. When many politicians and dignitaries visit Israel, they refuse to cross the Green Line. That means they do not enter Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, mainly due to political pressure. Much of the international community considers it occupied territory that belongs to the Palestinians, not Israelis. But as you can see, they may be missing a major side of Israel.
How about 3D printing? Are y'all doing anything in 3D printing?
Former U.S. Congressman and Trump economic advisor Dr. John Fleming is currently running for treasurer of Louisiana. That's one reason he came to Israel, building business for his home state. Here in what's called the Startup Nation, Fleming heard about new opportunities based in Samaria from Benjamin Tech, an initiative that supports and mentors new companies to get them established.
I'm very interested in how the economy is evolving here, bringing in other types of jobs, particularly in the cyberspace, digitalization, and again, the things that you heard here today, where we talk about all sorts of specialized things like fintech, and really bring in the same sort of entrepreneurs and innovators into Louisiana, the way they've done in Israel.
Welcome home. Our home is your home.
Fleming also met with Israel Gantz, the governor of the Benjamin Regional Council, the largest body of its kind here in terms of population.
Dr. Fleming from Louisiana, that he's preparing with us the first trade mission in Benjamin, and we're waiting for our friends all over the world to bring more trade mission. We together will build the bridges between the history and the future.
Gantz notes Benjamin is the biblical heartland of Israel and represents the return of the Jewish people back to their ancestral homeland.
Most of the biblical stories happen in Benjamin. We have here sites like Beit El, Shiloh, Eli, Anatot, and we are coming back. And we have a mission to develop this area.
Ruthie Lieberman, co-founder of the Yes Israel Project, helped organize Fleming's trip.
We are having him meet with our friends in government from the highest position in government, the Prime Minister, on down through the Ministers of Finance and Economics and Development, so that they can give him the tools that he needs to be able to enable these investments between Louisiana and Israel. And he hopes in that way to boost the economy of Louisiana.
Lieberman feels it's important the international business world recognizes the value of Judea and Samaria, a land known more accurately as disputed territory, according to the 1993 Oslo Accords, not occupied territory.
And we don't want to leave this part of the story out. We're standing in the Binyamin region, and the governor has just described to Dr. Fleming how this is one of the most important bases of the high tech being developed in Israel, in Judea, in Samaria, and Binyamin. These are regions that were shunned by the boycott movement. If BDS had its way, then no state in the U.S. would be investing here, because we are whatever you'd like to call us, but we see ourselves as a vibrant part of the state of Israel.
Fleming hopes to take what he has seen and heard here back home to the people of Louisiana.
I want to see trade and commerce partnership between Louisiana and Israel. Israel's smaller than most states in the United States, but they are really leaping forward when it comes to economic innovation, and even in the area of national defense. We have a lot to learn and share with our brothers and sisters in Israel, and I would love for Louisiana to be a conduit for that.
Up next, how the Israel Innovation Fund is helping to fulfill prophecy and reintroduce vineyards and winemaking to a new generation. The Israel Innovation Fund seeks to connect people from around the world to Israeli culture. That can be as simple as introducing a new generation to Israeli-made wine. Take a look. Adam Scott Balos, great to have you here in Jerusalem Dateline. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
You started the Israel Innovation Fund, and part of that is called Wine on the Vine. What do you mean by that?
Our flagship project of the Israel Innovation Fund, we have multiple different projects, is, like you said, called Wine on the Vine. The entire point of the project is to allow people to connect to the land of Israel in an entirely new, kind of updated way. Traditionally, the Jewish people and the Jewish National Fund have offered people the ability to plant trees in the land of Israel. So we noticed that trees are not really necessary to be planted in Israel anymore, and that there was one plant that's indigenous to the land of Israel that, by putting it into the ground, fulfills the biblical prophecies of Amos and Jeremiah. And there was nothing that filled that criteria other than grapevines, which also, I guess you could say, create jobs and build businesses.
Why is wine so important to the Jewish people?
Well, if you actually look at the history of the Jewish people and winemaking in the land of Israel, it becomes very clear. So if you look at the blessings from Jacob to Judah, wine is mentioned. In the Midrash, it said that our patriarch Judah washed his clothing in wine. Starting from Noah, the first thing he did was plant a vineyard. If you look at what the spies brought back from the land of Israel to tell the ancient Israelites that this land was a land flowing of milk and honey and fruit, it was grapes on a grapevine. And that's actually the symbol of Israeli tourism. If you look at Jewish observant life, okay, at every single bar bat mitzvah, at every bris when a baby is circumcised, at a young girl's baby naming, okay, a wedding, any type of simcha, so to speak, we always consecrate the moment over a glass of wine, okay? And it's to us, to the Jewish people, wine is a gift from God. And the Last Supper, like you mentioned, was a Passover Seder. And during the Passover Seder, we have to drink 4 full cups of wine. And one of the things that is very misunderstood about Jesus is that he was a Second Temple Jew that most likely drank more wine than he did water, because the water wasn't clean back then. And most interestingly, in the story, I believe it's Matthew, where he turns water into wine, or is that where he walks on the water?
In Cana, he turns the water into wine, his first miracle.
So that is actually one of the very first times in ancient record that we know where people say, why are you using the good wine? That there was actually a difference between good and bad wine. So apparently, Jesus was making some good wine.
Yeah, he did. And they said, you saved the good wine for last.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is normally what you do first, believe it or not.
So you want to transform the understanding of what's going on here in Israel to a younger generation?
I think it's very important to present Israel in its reality, not necessarily in this version of we're surrounded on all sides, we need your help. Israel's become a wonderful, robust, colorful, creative place for people of all walks of life. There's a reason why it's become such an international hub. And one of our goals at TIFF is to allow the next generation all over the world to be able to connect to Israel through its culture, through its language, through its food, through its wine. There's a very specific reason why we chose Israeli wine to be the first way we would promote Israel, and it's because there are wine drinkers that are Jewish, there are wine drinkers that are non-Jewish. It's important to Jews, it's important to non-Jews. Our generation, let's say 45 to 18 or 21, drinks more wine than any other generation that came before on this earth. And then when you include Gen X, the baby boomers, and the greatest generation that's still alive, more wine now is being drank than ever before. So over the last 20 years, Israeli wine has become much more popular, and we felt that it was the greatest way to break out of just the core audience of who's connected to Israel.
And finally, how can people get in touch with you?
They can go to wineonthevine.org. They can plant a vine at that site. They can choose whatever winery that we offer that they would like to support. If they want to order Israeli wine, they can go to wineonthevine.com. They can also follow me at Wine with Adam on Instagram, or you can find us on Instagram under Wine on the Vine or TIIF for the Israel Innovation Fund. Well, I think I gave you enough.
You gave me enough. Well, Adam Scott Balos, great to be with you here.
Thank you so much, Chris. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
In recent years, archaeologists have found evidence proving Adam Scott Balos' point about Israel's heritage of vineyards and winemaking. In fact, what they discovered was a winemaking industrial zone. Julie Stahl has more.
Israeli archaeologists uncovered this huge winemaking complex in the coastal city of Yavne.
And this area was one of the major centers of wine growing and wine production for international trade.
The Israel Antiquities Authority began this excavation here in 2019. It's a Byzantine-era industrial zone, and it's one of the largest excavations the IAA has ever carried out.
Some 200 to 300 people work at the site daily. In use during the 5th and 6th centuries, the facility would have produced and marketed more than 500,000 gallons of wine each year.
It was certainly a prestigious wine. I mean, this was a wine that we know was presented during the coronations of Byzantine kings. Justin II had wine from this region, what was called Gazan wine, presented at his table during his coronations.
While the name comes from where the wine was exported, the major headline from this discovery is its size and scope.
And this is what is also revolutionary in the way that we have not one single wine press somewhere in a field, but we have 5 wine presses of huge size for mass production of wine, all together in a cluster, and they're all situated within a well-planned industrial estate. So we have roads that go between the wine presses. They mirror each other in their architectural design, and they all have the possibility of having a huge quantity of wine produced in them.
Excavation director Dr. John Seligman explained how it worked.
So the grape juice would have come from behind me over here, from the treading floor, flowed through this channel and out into this area in front of me. This is what we call a filtration pit. It's the place where the grape juice was separated from the skins. That then would flow through our pipes and to either side to the collection vats. There are 3 to 4 days of fermentation in the pits. So that's the 3 and 4 days of time when they would be treading and filling the other one. Keep swapping back and forth.
The grapes would have come from surrounding vineyards, and the site had kilns for making the jars.
They have like a torpedo shape, and that was something which was known to people. Just like you know what a cola bottle looks like without having the word cola written on it.
The jars then went to one of 4 huge warehouses for fermentation.
So the aging would have taken place over a relatively short period in these large warehouses, and then the wine would be taken from here to the port and then exported abroad or drunk here in the various sites around the city.
According to Seligman, wine was often the drink of choice in those days because of the poor quality of the drinking water. Excavations here are scheduled to continue for 2 years. The site was supposed to be paved as a highway, but now the city plans to build a bridge over it to make it accessible to tourists. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Yavne, Israel.
Still ahead, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis shares about the special connection his family has with Israel and the Sea of Galilee. In his recent visit to Israel, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talked about how many Americans are familiar with thousands of years of Jewish history because of the Bible. It makes them feel connected to Israel, which led the governor to recount a personal anecdote of how precious that connection is for him and his wife, Casey.
We did not yet have kids, And so one of the things that Casey did when we were visiting the Sea of Galilee is to take an empty bottle of water and fill it up with water from the Sea of Galilee so that when we did have kids, we would use that water from here in Israel to baptize our kids. And so our first daughter was born. Our first daughter was born in 2016, no problem. We used the water. Our son was born in 2018 as I was running for governor. So we decided to wait till after the election and do his baptism in the governor's residence in Tallahassee following my swearing in as governor in January of 2019. We used the water for that. Unbeknownst to us, there's people that come clean up after when you're in a governor's residence. We weren't used to that in our own home. And all they saw was a half-used bottle of water. They didn't know the difference. And so the water got spilled out, and we were no longer had any. However, a week or two into my administration, we were down in Boca Raton at a synagogue, and I had announced that while we didn't have another bun in the oven, we did not have any more water from the Sea of Galilee. Within 24 hours, there were people here in Israel digging into the Sea of Galilee, and I was sent all the way from Israel this beautiful big glass jar filled with water from the Sea of Galilee that sat on my desk in the governor's office in Tallahassee until our third child was born and baptized, and we used that water to do it. But just think about it. What other country in the whole world could you have a story like that? You can't. The history and the connection are simply incomparable.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.